Chapter 1. The Unkillable Myth. It is December 1916. The Neva River in Petrograd is frozen solid. Beneath the ice, a body is found. His hands are frozen in mid-air, bound by rope. His lungs are filled with river water. For a century, you've been told the same terrifying legend. You've been told that a group of Russian aristocrats fed this man enough cyanide to kill an elephant, that he ate the poisoned cakes, drank the poisoned wine, and simply smiled. You've been told they shot him in the chest, left him for dead, only for him to spring back to life, attack his murderers, and run into the snowy courtyard. The problem? Most of that never happened. When Professor Dmitry Kosarovov conducted the official autopsy on December 20th, 1916, he found no trace of poison. What he did find was brutal human reality. 3 bullet wounds, one in the chest, one in the back, and one fired point blank into the center of his forehead. The myth of the immortal monster was invented by his murderers to justify their crime. They didn't want to admit they had botched the assassination of a simple peasant. They needed him to be a demon. But the truth about Grigori Rasputin is actually much darker than the myth, because he wasn't a demon with supernatural invulnerability. He was a master manipulator who hijacked the most powerful empire on Earth, not with magic, but with human psychology. And it all started with a secret the royal family was willing to destroy their country to keep. Chapter 2. The Pilgrim from Siberia. To understand the parasite, you have to understand the host. By the early 1900s, the Romanov dynasty was rotting from the inside. Tsar Nicholas II ruled over 130 million people with absolute power. But behind the gilded doors of the Winter Palace, the Tsar and Tsarina Alexandra were living in a state of sheer, suffocating terror. Their only son, Alexei, the heir to the Russian throne, was bleeding to death. Alexei had hemophilia, a genetic disorder where the blood cannot clot. In 1904, a simple bruise could cause weeks of agonizing internal bleeding. If the Russian public found out the future Tsar was this fragile, it would invite a revolution. So the parents kept it a secret. They locked themselves away, desperately searching for a miracle. Enter Grigori Rasputin. Born in a remote Siberian village of Pokroyska, Rasputin was uneducated, unwashed, and deeply magnetic. In his youth, he underwent a religious awakening. He left his family and walked thousands of miles across Russia as a stronyk, a wandering holy man. He didn't belong to the mainstream Orthodox Church. Rumors claimed he was connected to an underground outlawed sect called the Klisti, who allegedly believed that to achieve true repentance, one must first commit massive sins. The wilder the sin, the closer to God. While historians still debate if Rasputin was officially a member, his philosophy perfectly matched theirs. By 1905, Rasputin had arrived in St. Petersburg. He didn't look like the manicured aristocrats. He smelled of sweat and earth. He had a wild, unkempt beard, and he had eyes that people described as terrifyingly piercing. Eyes that seemed to see right through the physical world and into your neuroses. Through a network of superstitious nobles, Rasputin was introduced to the Tsar and Tsarina. They didn't see a dirty peasant. They saw the real Russia, a holy man sent by God. But Rasputin was about to do something no modern doctor could do, something that would cement his grip on the royal family forever. Chapter 3. The Healing and the Hook. In 1907, young Alexei suffered a severe bleeding episode. The royal doctors were useless. As a last resort, Tsarina Alexandra called for the Siberian peasant. Rasputin arrived, walked into the boy's room, and told the doctors to leave. He didn't bring bandages. He didn't bring medicine. He sat by the boy's bed, spoke in a low, soothing voice, and prayed. And the bleeding stopped. How did he do it? This is the question that has baffled historians for a century. Was it a miracle? No. Science and history offer much more chilling, practical explanations. First, the placebo effect. Tsarina Alexandra's anxiety was infectious. When she was frantic, her son's blood pressure spiked, pushing more blood into his injuries. Rasputin possessed an undeniable hypnotic calm. By calming the mother, he calmed the child, lowering the boy's blood pressure and allowing the bleeding to slow. Second, and far more lethal, the doctors of the era were unknowingly poisoning the boy. A brand new wonder drug had just been introduced to the market. It relieved pain. The doctors were feeding it to Alexei. That drug was aspirin. Today, we know aspirin thins the blood. It is the absolute worst thing you can give a hemophiliac. Rasputin, hating the medical establishment, explicitly ordered the doctors to stop all medical treatments when he was in the room. By simply banning the doctors, Rasputin stopped the aspirin. To the Tsarina, it was an undeniable divine miracle. To Rasputin, it was the ultimate leverage. He had just made himself the only thing standing between the Tsarina and the death of her son. He was now indispensable. But having power inside the palace wasn't enough for him. He was about to take that power onto the streets. Chapter 4. The Shadow Tsar. Once Rasputin secured his absolute safety via the Tsarina, the mask slipped. The holy man of St. Petersburg became its most infamous predator. He moved into a luxurious apartment. He began hosting massive drunken parties. Aristocratic women flocked to him, desperate for his blessing, his attention, and his touch. The secret police kept a massive, heavily classified surveillance file on him, detailing rampant public drunkenness, bribery, and sexual assaults. The Russian press got hold of the rumors. Political cartoons depicted Rasputin holding the Tsar and Tsarina like marionette puppets. The outside world, the public, didn't know about the boy's hemophilia. To the outside world, it just looked like the royal family had been hypnotized by a degenerate cult leader. Politicians warned Tsar Nicholas. The secret police warned him. Even the prime minister handed Nicholas a dossier of Rasputin's crimes. The Tsar's response? He threw the dossier into the fire. He said, "I prefer one Rasputin to 10 fits of hysterics from my wife." Nicholas chose family over country. It was a fatal mistake. In 1914, World War I erupted. Tsar Nicholas made the disastrous decision to leave the capital and take personal command of the army at the front lines. He left his wife, Tsarina Alexandra, in charge of the empire. And who was controlling Alexandra? Grigori Rasputin. For the next 2 years, an illiterate peasant effectively ran the Russian Empire. He ordered the firing of competent ministers and replaced them with his corrupt cronies. He dictated military logistics through the Tsarina's letters to his husband. The country's infrastructure collapsed. Millions of Russian soldiers were slaughtered on the front lines, freezing and starving, while Rasputin drank champagne in the capital. The aristocracy realized that if they didn't kill him, the Russian Empire would burn. Chapter 5. The Bloody Winter. Which brings us back to December 1916. Prince Felix Yusupov, one of the wealthiest men in Russia, invited Rasputin to his palace under the guise of meeting Yusupov's beautiful wife. Rasputin, blinded by ego and lust, walked right into the trap. We know the poison didn't work. Maybe the cyanide was old. Maybe it reacted with the sugar in the pastries. Maybe the conspirators lost their nerve and never used it. But they panicked. Yusupov pulled out a revolver and shot Rasputin in the chest. Rasputin collapsed. The conspirators celebrated. But when Yusupov went back to check the body, Rasputin's eyes snapped open. He lunged, tearing an epaulet off Yusupov's shoulder and fled into the freezing courtyard. He didn't make it far. The other conspirator, a right-wing politician named Pritishkevich, chased him into the snow. He fired twice. One bullet struck Rasputin's back. He fell. Then, standing over the gasping, bleeding peasant, they fired a third shot directly into his forehead. They bound his corpse, drove to the bridge, and dumped him into the frozen Neva River. They thought they had saved Russia, but they were too late. The damage was already done. Rasputin had stripped away the myth of the Tsar's divine right. He had shown the world that the monarchy was weak, corrupt, and insane. Just 10 weeks after Rasputin's frozen body was pulled from the river, the Russian Revolution began. Tsar Nicholas was forced to abdicate. A year later, the entire royal family, including young Alexei, was taken into a basement and executed by a firing squad. Grigori Rasputin didn't destroy the Russian Empire with dark magic. He destroyed it with the most dangerous weapon in human history: desperate, blind faith. The Romanovs were so afraid of losing their son, they let a parasite into their home. And the parasite ate the empire.